Dad, believe hello. Dad.
Пап.
Hi, Misha. How are you doing?
Привет.
Hi,
Misha Katsurin,
Misha Katsurin, co-founder of the Paper Believe project, a restorator from Kiev, who works on the Paper Believe website now, which helps tell our relatives in Russia the truth about the war in Ukraine. 11 million relatives of Ukrainians live in Russia. Now the closest people don't believe each other. On the third or fourth day of the war, I understood that my father had not called me yet, and that was quite strange. I mean, I understand that he's 58 years old and he lives in the forest, somewhere in the suburbs, near Nizhny Novgorod, and that he might just not know. He is not an active internet user. Putin announced a special operation to protect Donbass, and he watches television, reads newspapers, and listens to the Russian radio. So he was aware that he might know something different or nothing at all. So I called him to tell him about what was going on in Kiev. And he did not believe me. He started arguing with me and said that I am a victim of Ukrainian propaganda. And that, in reality, Russian soldiers help Ukrainians today. And that same old song that they save us from Nazism. I made a post on Instagram, which went viral. After this, after I saw the great volume of feedback, I understood that this is a huge problem and we should deal with it. Tell me, you really believe that Nazis came to power here and harassed the Russian-speaking population or not? In Ukraine, many generations were brought up with the thought that Ukraine is not Russia. Hang Moscow on a tree. The young people are brought up with hatred toward the Russians. Look, Dad, I know that the laws are adopted so that teachers don't teach in Russian in schools. That Russians are not an indigenous nation in Ukraine. Even though 40% of the population in Berdyansk, Zaporizhia are Russians. Your grandma is the distinguished teacher of Ukraine. There are so many Russian people there. Dad, look, their rights are oppressed. Is this not true? Look, it is not true about the oppression. This is the important thing I wanted to talk about. That was happening when I lived in Ukraine. Why are you telling me this? I'm telling you because I live here. Why do people believe in propaganda? Volodymyr Yermolenko, philosopher, analyst. Propaganda always convinces those who can't be responsible for their lives. Those who feel that somebody else from outside controls their lives. That's why propaganda. That's why these conspiracy theories convince people so well. If I feel that my life does not depend on that even the lives of my family don't depend on them, all the more the life of my settlement, my city, my country, that I can't change anything. Then I just push aside, so to say outsource the responsibility, if we use the modern language, and in general the perception of who makes the decision. If we talk about Russia, the studies show that these people are mostly those who are 50 years old and older. That is, these are people who are nostalgic about the Soviet Union, who haven't passed the evolution of critical thinking. And that's why they trust our television. Soloviev, Kaiselov, 60 Minutes, Russian television hosts and programs. Yes, I watch them sometimes. Video, Telegram vet channel. Do you trust them? Any information should be trusted when checked. But about 70% are true. How do you feel about the military operation in Ukraine? Positively. I even think that the pace of the operation is a little slow. The military should be active, but, understandably, there were circumstances. But the most important thing is not to stop. We need to go further. I think we need to occupy Poland and all Baltic countries. Sochi, Krasnodar Krai, Russia. I trust the official mass media. So I trust what I read and what I heard on the news. I don't think it is reasonable to search for something else somewhere. How can it end? We'll kill Kokols, Ukrainians. Video, YouTube, that's the only possible way. There are no more options. These Nazi's. And now you ask me what will we do? We'll kill them. We will not ask. And everything associated with it. We haven't killed them during World War II, so we will kill them now. The second category of people who are convinced. YouTube channel of Anatoly Shariy, Ukrainian pro-Russian politician. By sophisticated propaganda, not the one that goes through television, but through the internet, Telegram channels, and so on. This is the category of people who want, who have some degree of subjectivity, and want to think critically. Respectively, they believe that everyone lies to them. If the first ones think that people on television tell only the truth, people of the second category think that people on television only lie. And anyone on television lies. Any government lies and any journalist lie. So they need to search for some hidden sources of information. These are people able to critical thinking, but propaganda can use this critical thinking against critical thinking. That is why Russia Today Russian television network has a question more slogan. Or Sputnik has a slogan, talk about what they are silent about. Video, YouTube Volodymyr Zolkin. Hello. Hello. Interview with Russian prisoners. My name is Volodymyr. I call you from Ukraine. I am a journalist. Would you like to talk to your grandson? Oh well, of course. I am okay, don't worry. What kind of person is this? Okay. Look what the Ukrainians are doing there. Don't go. Ask her what they are doing. What is going on there? What? What is going on? Where? You said, look what they are doing. They who? They talk about something on television. I can't understand anything. God, don't believe them. They tell only lies. Volodymyr Zolkin, social activist. Prisoners. You see, they haven't watched Russian television for about a month. And without watching Russian television for about a month, and even more, having seen all this with their own eyes, they almost become normal people. And they prove their parents wrong by themselves. They say, Dad, why are you so zombified? Mom, how could they zombify you? Video, current time. What do you think about the Ukrainian army? Well, they are Nazis. Nazis. Yes, of course. What do you think about the Ukrainian army? Ukrainian army. I think they are evil. They are fascists. And they think they're, in Russia, that the prisoners are in front of the machine gun barrels. But then their parents watch this video by us. They also see their children. They see the casual atmosphere here. Mass event. Soldiers from 17 Russian cities refuse to go to war in Ukraine, human rights activist. And anyway, they're getting that this can't be fake. And anyway, something becomes clear in their heads. In my opinion, the main goal of propaganda is to destroy the opponent. Destroy the enemy. Yes, propaganda is a part of the war. It's information warfare. And in Russian propaganda concerning Ukraine, we see two main goals. These are to prove that the Ukrainians don't exist and prove that if they do exist, they don't have any moral right to exist. That is, we don't have a moral right to exist because we are Nazis, fascists, and so on.
Это бизнес-проект.
Напомню, Украина – слово польское. Русское слово, то есть означает окраин. Русское слово – это Малороссия. Все, нет там никакого государства.
А это что вообще?
Video, YouTube, what are these countries? Ukraine. It's not a country. It's a part. Lenin gave it in his time. It all depends on what the USA is going to do. It is afraid to act so far. It is terrified, because we have a few very strong missiles, which will destroy the USA. There's a war cult in Russia, understandably. Firstly, it is based on the great victory over the Third Reich and its allies during World War II. And the Nazis were the absolute evil in Soviet times. Andrei Yusich, public historian, head of the public organization After Silence, and they are now in Russian public discourse. No Nazism. It is a public evil which people managed to fight. And it is a reason to be proud. Crimea is against Nazism, for a world without Nazism, for Russia. And it is clear that to try to mobilize the mass of Russians against Ukraine, it was necessary to show them an understandable enemy. Organizing a concert for a world without Nazism, for Russia, for President. A Nazi is an understandable enemy, and there is no need for real Nats, because everyone who is an admirer of the so-called Ukrainian project is a Nazi to them. That is, an admirer of the fact that the Ukrainian political nation has to exist, and it has to exist within the Ukrainian state.
На Украине решили выпустить мемуары одного из идеологов нацизма Йозефа Геббельса.
Новый скандал на Украине. Депутат Рады распевает песни, славящие Гитлера.
В школах Украины появился новый учебник «Бандеровская азбука», в которой главный герой – юный воин УПА.
On the other hand, they tried to play on some fears of the Western world, for which nationalism and Nazism are also negative phenomena, which it is ready to fight against, condemn, and so on. That's why the Azov regiment topic was constantly brought up. All Western mass media wrote about it, without noticing real far-right organizations on a larger scale in their countries. On the other hand, we understand that Russia condemns Nazism and supports far-right organizations in Europe. So there's no real anti-Nazism in this state. Let's use the standard example. Or, for example, the alternative for Germany, which is supported by Russia, supports various Russian projects in Germany and votes in their favor. Irene E. Kelson, candidate of philological sciences, conflictologist. Modern methods of information influencing has a different effect on different categories. Relatively speaking, we will not believe the claim that a boy in underpants was crucified. Rostov region information warfare. But there will be people on whom this method has its effect. And for thus, for example, they will treat to use fanning of language conflicts or conflicts between migrants and receiving communities. Depending on the goal it has. The crucified boy meme has a goal of discrediting the country or military. And the fanning of language conflicts means the goal of reducing social cohesion, provoking emotional reactions of people and disorientation or exhaustion with these issues, and so on. So the goals are different here. Rostov region Helena Pishniak, refugee from Sloviansk. They took a kid, a 3-year-old boy, wearing a shirt and underpants and nailed him to the board like Jesus. One man was nailing and 2 men were holding him. And all this happened in front of his mother. Undoubtedly, there must be mythical elements. Some basic fears of people must be evoked. For example, now is the Russian narrative about those biolaboratories in Ukraine, which were actively promoted by Medvedchuk, Ukrainian politician. It means that people are afraid of biological weapons because these are invisible weapons and it is not clear how they work. Fake video, Television 5 channel near Kharkiv and Poltava. Components of biological weapons were developed. Igor Konashenkov, official representative of the Ministry of Defense of Russia. According to the documents, in 2022, the American party was planning to work in Ukraine on pathogens of birds, bats, and reptiles with a further transition to the study of the possibility of them transferring African swine fever and anthrax. Birds, which flew to destroy Moscow. I constantly ask why they haven't arrived yet. If they were here, and Russians invaded. Why? Simple questions. Right. I mean, you can't transfer to something more difficult there because we can't figure out the simplest stuff. I mean, they can't figure out and answer the simplest questions. Very often, parents thank us that their son was captured by the armed forces of Ukraine and not by some punishers. And in this case, we also should ask, what do you mean by punishers and mercenaries? We need to tell them about very primitive things. I constantly ask them what the Azov regiment is, what the Azov unit is. Of course, propaganda can be different. Propaganda can be different. It can be direct, the one that we see on the Russian state television channels. It can be less. It can be much gentler and more discreet. That's how Russian propaganda worked in the countries where they understood that they could not promote their idea of Russia being a big country and having a unique model. They practically don't speak about Russia. They speak about the Western world. They try to find those problems of the Western world, which are crucial, develop them, and show that these are problems that will destroy the Western world, and so on. In the EU, the authorities are sounding an alarm. There are strikes not only in France, but also in Belgium, Germany, the Netherlands, Serbia, and Bulgaria. In each country, the movement is interpreted according to their realities. But the fact remains, slowly but surely, yellow vests are capturing Europe. The same happened in Ukraine. It means that in Ukraine, all this network of pro-Russian, latently Russian mass media, such as Medvedchuk's holding, a blog of Sharia, Strana, Nash Channel, and so on, never said that Russia is good. They said that Ukraine is bad, and the West is bad. Nash Channel, the pro-Ukrainian position can be pro-Western as well, pro-Southern or pro-Northern, who said that the united pro-Ukrainian position is pro-NATO. You associate pro-Ukrainian and pro-Western. And I believe that the Russian Federation, which attacked Ukraine and does everything to make Ukraine go to the West, shows where it will be better for Ukrainians. You think formulate. The main goal is to demoralize, to make people think that, well, to destroy the subjectivity, the feeling that Ukraine is a country worth fighting for. Judging from the interviews with people from reoccupied territories, Russians are now worse than Germans. People, some of who remember World War II, say that they are worse than Germans, or the same as Germans, and so on. It shows that this trauma in Ukraine is on a different level, on the level of crimes against the civilian population. In Russia, the trauma of World War II is about victories, which they constantly want to repeat in order to prove their significance. My father is a quite kind man. He is a very religious man. He works in a church. It is easier with him. I mean, his case is not the most complicated. Because he says, where have you been when people were burnt in Odessa? I understand what happened in Odessa. I know the situation, but I did not know all the details at the time. And these textbook questions like, where have you been for 8 years? Are very hard to answer if you are not ready. And that conversation was more about my personal experience. And then I understood that my own stories of my life, screenshots of my conversations with my mom, ex-wife of my father have the most effect. List in house your grandma. Terrible. They stay at home because Berdyansk city in Zaporizhzhia region is occupied. They mostly stay in the bathroom. Because when there's shelling in the street, it is the safest place. There's no shelter there. Grandma needs to go to the hospital to be given an AV drip every morning. I ask them not to do it, but Grandma insists. And Mom brings her to the hospital for an AV drip while passing lots of armed personnel carriers, tanks, and Russian and Chechen soldiers. So it is terrifying. My mom texted me that I have tried to take them out from occupied Berdyansk for about a month, and I was not able to do it. And Russians declared green corridors. And as usual, these green corridors were not real, and they shot locals. There were some acquaintances, and my mom sent me screenshots, and I sent them to my father. And to this, he replied, "Oh God, war is terrifying." And at that moment, he stopped calling the war a special operation. When someone tells about what they saw or what they experienced, it is harder to question it. It is also possible. And I know about such cases when people don't believe because the world picture is different. But I think that personal stories make people more empathic than something that would be more abstract for people. The Russians are afraid to believe it, so they will be inclined to believe the information that confirms something in what they have believed before. And that is a problem. Because then people believe more television than people who have witnessed the events. Because it is an upsetting truth. It is the truth that makes you do something and change somehow. It's the truth that can undermine your whole biography. It can undermine your past and your faith in Great Russia. I think that's why people are hiding away from this. Russia can exist only if it exists as an empire. That's all. And an empire is something big and something very important. All this exists for this reason. It understandably has some economic grounds. There were oligarchic clans and Putin profits from them. They have more trivial reasons for this, because one can earn a lot of money by exploiting this enormous country. But for regular people, the stories about greatness will be enough. The USA really invests money in order to destroy, to turn against each other, and destroy Orthodox Slavic nations, to turn them against each other. They destroy Serbia, Syria, Palestine, Georgia. They interfere in everything and weaponize countries so that brotherly Slavic nations would kill each other. That's the only thing Americans need. Okay, Dad, then tell me what makes Russia better than the USA in this case. The USA bombs Syria. Russia, for example, is now bombing Ukraine. There were some things on which he agreed with me and disagreed with the government. I was afraid so. I deleted those things not to harm him. But he was affected. This all led to me losing the possibility to communicate with him. He blocked me. I got through to my father's sister, Ira. She told me that he is fine. He is healthy, but he will not talk to me again. As far as I know, she said he got a call. And I know that many public figures got calls from the top and were told that if they open their mouths, they and their family members will be sentenced to 15 years in prison.
То 15 років вам в'язниці, 15 років вашим рідним.
Mothers, grandmothers. And my father also became a public figure, because all the biggest world mass media published my story. And I understand that for Russians, he is a bullhorn of Ukrainian propaganda to some extent. He can't talk to me anymore. Once he replied to my email in a very reserved manner that he is fine. And that's all. Russia is. We can call it postmodern fascism. Russians now have a slogan, what is the power, brother? Power is in the truth. Noted that in truth and not in righteousness. But in the conviction that you are right. That's what the power is. The fight against facts, against proof, against intelligence has started. There's no righteousness in modern Russia. It does not know what it offers the world. This is its big drama and big tragedy. And its propaganda is aimed at proving wrong, so to say, all other righteousness. The righteousness of the Western world, the righteousness of the democracy, the righteousness of Ukraine, the Ukrainian nation, and so on. This is an attempt to use contradictions. Constant attempt to use contradictions. It is clear that many Russians have hoped to live this Western lifestyle, but propaganda imposes them that it is bad, that London does not sleep. Washington, D.C. does not sleep and only thinks of how to capture Russia. There are some similar features between the Russian Empire and the modern Russian Federation. Some words they use are similar. For example, there's an interesting case in Trostenets, a city in Sumy region. A diary was found in the city council. It is small, just a few pages. It was kept by one of Russian military. This is a diary of a Russian soldier. He writes 11 days passed since leaving some city. We hold the city. Everything here looks terrible. We looted all stores like fascists. We broke out windows. People are afraid of us. We have been listening to Kokol, Ukrainian radio, for the second day. For example, he uses a word Kokol. This is the term that originates in imperial times, has been used during Soviet time and is used now. It means that Soviet propaganda. Oh, not Soviet. I'm sorry. Russian propaganda is quite rigid and conservative. I don't remember whether it was voiced somewhere that Russian used propaganda shells in Chernihiv. These are shells with leaflets inside. When they exploded, these leaflets spread out. This practice was applied during World War II, and they try to use it even now. This is a problem of their special operation. It appears that they rely on misinformation. They brought up the category of people who live in a virtual world. And they thought that all these pro-Russian bloggers on YouTube and all these Medvedchuks, who has millions of views on YouTube and so on, are the real power. It turned out that it is not the real power, it is misinformation. And the fact that Putin, as everyone says, got all those reports from the Federal Security Service, which state what he once stated and not what is really happening. They become victims of their own propaganda, so he is. They believe in that. And this is their big problem. Because they believe in what does not exist. They believe in their own fiction. A group of 4 planes with pilots from Kapelko Preparatory Group of the kindergarten lead AFLA passed. If you talk about Russians, yes, they believe in it. They go out. There are marches of strident patriotism there now with Sid, letters on the posters. And they write He for peace with Sid instead of a Russian letter. It means that they are absolutely sure and convinced that they go out for peace. And we also need to talk with them about it. And if during this communication we manage to help them build a basic chain of logic, if we can, then they understand that they go out for war. But in general, they all are convinced that they go out for peace. Russian propaganda works not only on creating a world picture, but also on totally disorienting people in the information. One of their methods is to provide many different versions so that people would stop trying to understand which one is right and which one is true and just get tired. And that's why the ideas of one nation of fascists and banderites, members of Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, may appear in their heads from different parts of propaganda. In different moments, they used both concepts. And there are schizophrenics on propaganda channels. Look, now I even troll them about it a bit. Because when talking on the phone, they always call it war. And I say, listen, aren't you afraid of being sentenced to 15 years? It is forbidden to call it war. And they are like, oh right. I say, be careful. I say, well, a special operation. Okay. But tell me, please, how do you understand the goal of this special operation? I'm not interested in politics. That's an approximate response. We understand why they commit crimes. And it is almost always people from the distant regions of the empire. Because the environment there is very criminalized. There are many petty criminals in poor regions. These are not some kingpins. These are those who used to steal, rob, and so on. On the other hand, the culture of EUB, convict, practice is unified, is very common in these regions. You can find many publications in Russian mass media. We don't quite understand that. We want to show, for example, these Russian criminals who committed crimes here as someone with an ideology, as if they want to kill Ukrainians. But in reality, they want to kill people who look better than them or act with more dignity and so on. That's why we don't need to think that all people are programmed by propaganda to the extent that they think only with ideologies. They have very trivial motives that we have to understand to confront them somehow. We gathered on our website all information that we could get from psychologists and negotiators so that people would have a crib note. From that side, Russian television works all the time. And also, we have to constantly work from this side. It's like a tug of war. In fact, now we, the relatives of people in Russia, are the alternative media. Probably, you will not be able to convince them now. But if such questions arise, the relationship is still important and it was not bad. At least, wait until you are asked. Is it true that? What do they say in your news about it? How do they show you this? People hear the unusual and, in our case, opposite information or see the opposite picture when they ask about it. And then they are more open to hearing something else except what they see on television or hear from acquaintances. The more people don to support the regime, the better for us. I understand that today there will not be some serious influence when it comes to a nuclear war. When happens what happens, it will not change the course of the war. But this is important because people have to know the truth. They are victims, people are brainwashed. And if you have a normal relationship, think of it as help. As a dialogue with a child, as and be wise and reserved. Because, of course, the first thing you will want to do is to hang up. But we are needed. We have to be better than this. We have to be wiser than this. We have to be. Today we have to be strong on all fronts. On the emotional one, on the physical one, and any of them. I mean, 1. Get ready. 2. Use personal stories. And 3. Be reserved and wise. These are my 3 tips. The journalist Liza Sivitz. The video editing, Valentina Rodzewska. The editor, Alexander Nazarov.